Judge Joe Brown is stepping in to break down exactly why the lawsuit Anton Daniels' family filed against Corey Hoke is a complete waste of time. Because Judge Joe Brown isn't mincing words, calling this whole thing straight up BS and saying it never should have made it past the idea stage. And here's where it gets interesting. He hints that this is just how the game is played in California. Lawyers out there will smile in your face, hype up your case, and drain your pockets knowing good and well you don't have a shot at winning. But don't just take my word for it. Let's get into the video and let the judge break it all down himself.
Entirely too litigious, and this kind of junk is what's clogging up the courts and providing lawyers who aren't really prepared to operate in a court environment because they're too inexperienced the opportunities to make an enormous sum of money by playing on people's emotions, whereas those people who really need to be able to get into court can't afford it or the courts are too crowded. This kind of stuff, it's sublimely stupid or it's entertaining depending upon your point of view. It ranges from President Andrew Jackson trying to literally murder some people and fighting duels where he mortally wounded a person or two for saying his wife was divorced, which she was, but that was supposed to be a grievous insult back then, to something that we used to find in my day and time is our primary form of entertainment when we got bored at school. We'd run to dozens. Hey, man, I don't say nothing but your mama, man. Hey, man, your mama look like she out the planet of the apes, man. I don't want to say nothing, man. They gave her the part right away. She didn't even have to hardly do no audition because they say she didn't need no makeup or no costume, man. See, we used to do that all the time from elementary school, junior high school, I guess they'd call it middle school now, and high school. That was our entertainment. But, these folk, now, man, it's all about my mama, man. Calm down, man. So what? You see, and then there's this case, New York Times versus Sullivan, 1962, United States Supreme Court. And it kind of laid it out. And I think people are too full of themselves these days to understand the humor. And it was like, one of the ways of getting somebody off your back in elementary school was if they were talking about you and you got upset, you could guarantee that they wouldn't leave you alone. But if you act like no big thing and talk about their folk back, that just became friendly banter. So.
Yeah, real talk. The black community has always had this thing where we clown each other, cap on each other, and talk trash just for the fun of it. It's so deep in our culture that they literally built entire TV shows around it. Your mama jokes were practically a whole genre, and that's just facts. But here's what you really need to appreciate. Watching Judge Joe Brown rattle off case laws and specific statutes completely from memory is on another level. It doesn't matter what topic you throw at him. If it touches the field of law, he's pulling out real case law references like it's nothing. And what's wild is he's basically saying this whole lawsuit is borderline pointless, but he's about to go deeper on exactly why the case Anton Daniels' family is filing against Corey Hoke feels like a direct attack on freedom of speech and expression itself.
Overwhelmed, and I think we've got too much sissification in our society today. And that can apply male or female. We get too sensitive. So they initiated it. They're the men in their life. They put this fool show on. In one sense.
So here's the question, because this is the wife suing Corey for depicting.
I know, yeah.
Does she have a case?
I don't know. I'd say on the New York Times v. Sullivan, no. And the other thing is it becomes symbolic, symbolism, and, it's one of those cases where, okay, the plaintiff wins and gets $1 damages.
Is it worth it?
Well, let's put it this way. It's bullshit, and it ties up the courts. We don't want to fund an adequate court system. And we are anxious to select judges who are too inexperienced to really be holding their positions. And we popularized being lawyers to the extent that we've got way too many for the caseload that's out there. And then the caseload is backed up because the prices that have to be charged to keep the doors open have gotten entirely too high because there's not a sufficient volume going through the typical lawyer's office. And then you have these national ads about something and something, which are not really law firms. They're franchises like Mickey D's, and they won't take a case that needs to go to trial. They'll take something that can be settled, and then you don't get a very big settlement for that. But I won't mention them because I don't want to be subject.
Now, here's something people don't realize. When you file a lawsuit, you can't just show up with hurt feelings. You have to come with specific damages and a dollar amount you're actually seeking. And in this case, Anton Daniels and his family are suing for at least $35,000, and that number isn't random. That's the minimum threshold required to even bring a case to that particular court, so they had to hit that number just to get in the door. But hold up. Judge Joe Brown is pointing out that a lot of these claims are going to get swallowed up in the process, and filing in California makes it even worse because that court system is already overwhelmed and overpopulated with cases. Listen to this. This lawsuit was filed back around February 23rd, and it's now April, meaning 3 months have passed and they still haven't even had the complaint accepted yet. And here's where it gets really interesting. The complaint itself isn't all hard facts. A good chunk of it is based on what the family believes Corey Hawk is, not necessarily what they can prove. But I'm watching this closely. I'm pulling the files, and if they actually pick this case up, trust me, we're going to be right here breaking down every single move.
Another bullshit law action, but it's gotten out of hand.
All right. Well, let me ask you this question. If he would have sold the T-shirts depicting his family as Planet of the Apes and made a profit, would that make the case stronger?
No, it wouldn't. It's like, okay, how often do we have political cartoons in the middle of the editorial section of the newspaper where they depict political, social, media, sports character negatively, or depict somebody as a snake or a lizard or a vulture or something like that? I mean, just because you put somebody out is looking like something out of a chimp out of Planet of the Apes, well, that's not saying that it would not be astute commentary on what's going on. So, yeah, again, I have a sneaking suspicion.
That's just like my kids are not underage, but my grandkids are, and somebody trying to find a picture of them and then depicting them in a, inappropriate manner. Now, inappropriate meaning, let's say Planet of the Apes, but if it's inappropriate, something sexual, then that's something totally different in a court of law. Correct?
Not really. No, it's not. It depends on what it is. Like right now, it used to be a grievous insult to call somebody a homosexual. Okay. If the person really were it doesn't make any difference, minor or adult.
And that's the wild part. How exactly do you walk into a courtroom and prove or disprove someone's sexuality? Like, think about that for a second, because that is one of the grayest, most unprovable gray areas you could ever try to litigate in front of a judge. If you're making that claim, you better come with rock-solid evidence, not a photo of a man wearing a pink shirt, because that's not going to hold up to anything. There's actually a real precedent for this kind of case. There's a woman named Aliga Graham who covered the Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion case, and Megan was actually able to sue her. And correct me if I'm wrong on the details. The reason she could sue is because that particular content creator didn't just create, but actively spread an AI-generated video of Megan Thee Stallion appearing nude, presenting it as if it were real footage. You won't believe how far that kind of damage can reach, because spreading something false and presenting it as truth is textbook defamation. So listen to this. It doesn't matter if you made it or just hit the share button. Because if you're pushing out false information about someone, you could find yourself on the wrong end of a lawsuit real fast.
From the New York State Supreme Court, if somebody was called a homosexual and it was not true, that was a grievous insult subject to civil damages. But in New York, they ruled that there's nothing insulting about being called a homosexual, so it's not actionable. You can't sue anybody for calling you a homosexual, even if you happen to be a normal person. And you say, I'm grievously offended and I want to bust him right in his jaw for calling me that. So, it depends on where you happen to be and what kind of silly season is in effect at that time.
So, but you cannot, and this has nothing to do with the Anton Daniels, Corey Holcomb lawsuit. It has nothing to do with that. I'm just giving a different example here. You cannot take a picture of a minor and put that picture of a minor in any type of sexual.
What about this kid?
Let me just finish that. Because you have a lot of people.
Now, I'll be honest. At first, I wasn't quite following why Dana was seemingly mixing these two situations together, because Corey Hoke wasn't depicting the family or the daughter in any kind of sexual way whatsoever. She's just digging deeper and expanding on the broader topic of defamation and the legality around sharing images of minors. And if she was trying to use that as a direct comparison to make her point, I'm sorry, that would be one of the wildest segues I've ever seen. Because these two situations are not even in the same zip code. You won't believe how differently the law treats these scenarios, because one carries a significantly heavier legal weight than the other, and mixing them up could actually muddy the whole argument. So after thinking it through, I'm giving Dana the benefit of the doubt here. She's expounding, not conflating, and there's a big difference between the two.
Who are putting, that minor porn on these websites, which is against the law, is that the same? Is that different? You cannot take a minor and depict them in any type of sexual.
The answer is it depends. Now, remember a few years back when they had this 12, 13-year-old little freak who was going around being a tranny and performing on stage in New York at all of these. You remember that? Now, what happens if somebody made an editorial comment about that particular child doing what is in fact something that is a reality that the child and I guess a parent or something brags about, that he's a little, what do they call them when they do that kind of stuff? Drag queen.
Oh, drag queen, yes.
Yeah, so he's been a little drag queen, so supposing.
The backlash on that situation was absolutely massive, cutting across every race, every background, and every walk of life you can think of. You won't believe how universal the outrage was. People who never agree on anything were on the exact same page when it came to how that little boy was displayed and allowed to be pulled into that whole culture. The only group that seemed unbothered? That particular community itself. And even then, there were some voices within that community who couldn't defend it either.
You put out a cartoon implicating him for being a drag queen. You see what I'm saying? Truth in a defamation action is always an absolute defense. And what goes on is, well, let's say in this case, let's suppose that when somebody saw an actual picture of the children, somebody started laughing. Man, they ain't gonna lie, but they do kind of look like they could play in the Planet of the Apes, I mean, it may be. I hate to say it, but there are ugly children, Red Fox used to say, follow an ugly kid home, you find some ugly parents,
And you know what? So I get what you're saying, because it's not cut and dry, because first of all, this is social media. You are a public figure, if you're a content creator such as myself. And the guy, Corey Holcomb, he's a comedian. So he was making a joke about somebody's family.
Yeah.
And other apes. So that all plays a factor to where, okay, this lawsuit is not going to go anywhere because you have a comedian making fun of a whole family. It was nothing sexual. It was nothing, provocative. I'm talking about in the worst kind, depicting a minor. It was none of that. making a joke of a family, painting them as Planet of the Apes. So,
yeah, I mean, oh, they offended a child. Oh my God. Yeah, but look what you do raising your child. They let them get all out of hand. They're growing up to be little monsters who are out of control. Who is doing the disfavor to the children? You, who's promoting this dysfunctionality, or somebody that's talking about them? See,
but I will say this: the minor daughter here, she's 17, but still a minor.
What if Anton Daniels' own daughter has feelings about the way her father carries himself on the internet, the way he speaks on women's issues, or the way he might be perceived as another woman's man? You feel me? What are the real ripple effects of that dynamic on a child who has to process all of that from the inside looking out? Because here's the thing. As kids, we're conditioned to stay in a child's place, meaning we don't just walk up and check our parents on their behavior, no matter how much it might be affecting us. So in that particular dynamic, she may not feel safe or comfortable enough to even approach her father about how his actions are landing with her, and that's a heavy thing to sit with. But now you're turning around and saying that someone on the outside commenting on the family is so detrimental that it warrants an entire lawsuit because the child has been affected.
We never have been in the public eye. So,
well, yeah, it happens. But, families have always suffered for what somebody else in the family has done. So, and see, I also, considering the individuals in question, is this for real or is it another PR stunt to ramp up ratings and social media income? So you can look at it that way.
Now, let me ask you this one last question. Because this is filed in Los Angeles, and I'm sorry, California,
Lord.
Y'all have the lawyers out there know how to get that money. So does that play a factor in these type of lawsuits because it's Los Angeles?
It is so crowded out there that the lawyers have to subscribe to what used to be a pager service, and they got a 48-hour notice that they would be put on a 2-hour notice. You couldn't tell when it would occur, and you had to pay attention to your pager so you could show up in court in 2 hours flat with your client. So you had to make sure that your client and your witnesses, which was just about impossible, were going to be there on 2 hours notice after you gave them a 2-day notice, no telling when this was going to occur. The other thing, in Los Angeles, you have this problem. The California is so flat, broke, busted that they cannot afford to pay but 3 days worth of court operations a week. So the judges donated a good chunk of their salaries back so the courts can stay open 4 days a week in civil court. And the state can only afford 3 days a week. So you've got everything overloaded, and the cases that really need to be heard don't get heard.
Anton Daniels and his family are burning time and money chasing a lawsuit that has some serious fundamental problems from the jump. Hold up, because here's the first major wall they're going to slam into. California's SLAPP law is almost certainly going to step in and shield Corey, protecting his content as comedic expression and free speech. And yeah, it might sting like a straight-up insult, but an insult and defamation are two completely different animals in a courtroom. Think about this. Corey never put the kid's name on that shirt, never put the wife's name on that shirt, and never once called out their specific names while presenting it. Now here's where it gets real interesting. The only reason we all know that shirt was directed at Anton's family is because Anton's family themselves took ownership of it. And that's the classic hit dog will holler moment.